Psychology and Criminal Justice. Can you hear me okay?
Sure.
Can you hear me? Oh, I love it. Thanks to the Normal Theater and to Illinois State University's Department of Psychology for hosting tonight's free screening of Legends of the Night. I hope you enjoyed the film. It's very moving. Plus also the various events on campus that featured tonight's special guest, Dr. Travis Langley. Tonight's panel will represent a variety of academic disciplines that merge on the superhighway of pop culture, and we are very interested in what you guys have to say as well. So we will be taking your questions, and also we would love to have you have a meet and greet with Travis after the Q&A to buy some books, so you can just say hi at home. And just say hi. So let's meet our panel, and just give a wave. Shelly Clevenger, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Criminal Justice at ISU. She conducts research on sexual assault, intimate partner violence, cyber victimization, and cultural criminology, specifically comic books. She's a huge, incredible Hulk enthusiast, and if you ask her nicely, she will show her calf, which is tattooed with the Hulk and Bruce Banner. Scott Jordan is a PhD, professor and chair of the Department of Psychology. He's a cognitive psychologist who conducts research on the roots of cooperative behavior, and he's being very cooperative this evening by being here. Thank you so much. He uses pop culture in the classroom. He's a very proud owner of an international comic book collection. Leandra Parris is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology. She's a school psychologist who specializes in crisis intervention and trauma. She has a passion for storytelling and how it influences youth and marginalized groups. Eric Wesselmann is an associate professor in the Department of Psychology at Illinois State. He's a social psychologist who conducts research on social exclusion, stigma, and religion and spirituality. And as one who studies horrors and its impact on people, he knows what scares you. And our special guest this evening is Dr. Travis Langley from the Department of Psychology at Henderson State University. He's an expert on the interface between psychological science and popular culture, and he authored, of course, the acclaimed book, Batman in Psychology, A Dark and Stormy Night, which you can pick up over here. Thank you very much. He's edited 7 books in this domain. There are more on the way, very exciting. Psychology Today carries his blog, Beyond Heroes and Villains, and he's one of the 10 most popular psychologists on Twitter with over 100,000 followers. And fun fact, during graduate school, he was an undefeated champion on the Wheel of Fortune game show. That's how you pay off those student loans.
So that's how you feed children when you're married in graduate school.
Travis, I'd like to start with you. Watching the wonderful film and your role in it, I was very moved to hear from your students and how your students talked about how the class, this is not just an ordinary class. They went to class to learn, and what they found out was they could bond with one another. They had dealt with bullying during their youth, and in this class, they made connections with one another, and I found this to be rather extraordinary. You don't hear about this in a lot of countries. Could you expand on that a little bit, more about that?
I'm using fiction to talk about real psychology. I'm using these particular stories. With Batman and his enemies repeatedly, you're looking at people with tragic backgrounds and looking at what brings out the worst in some and the best in others. Why does one take their pain and go in a bad direction? Why does somebody else take their pain and try to keep other people from going through what he went through? And the students come in, they we're going to look at Batman, we read comic books and some psychology. It'll be fun. And they discover it's a lot of work. But yeah, I got to go read some graphic novels today, or I've got to read, some of these things, the psychology things Dr. Langley was teaching us to read, because that was right before my book came out. So I gave them a couple of the chapters from it, but they did not actually read the book in that class. When Brett came to record this, Brett was the filmmaker. He was doing his Indiegogo to get the project rolling, but my class was about to end, so he did not have the Indiegogo done yet. He came and interviewed us first. And then later on, when Michael got the honorary doctorate in the fall, I was there. Kerry Friedman, the rabbi there, he and I were both there when Michael got his doctorate. And so that's why my hair is one length when I'm in the classroom, and a different length. I was like, oh, he wants to record a little more. It's like, he didn't use any of my first interview. He redid it. But Sean, the student who was talking about, it's like these tattoos. Is this what I'm doing? He was a freshman. How a freshman taught me into letting him into the class, I don't even remember, but 3 years later, when I taught the Batman class again, Sean was a senior, and he did it again. Although, we got to listen to something else, so I gave him some options. He chose that on his transcript, there was, back when he was a freshman, class called Batman. As a senior, Advanced Batman. And he's recently gotten his master's in counseling, and there's a related project we'll be doing for 2018. And I thought, you should write something on some of these things that you were doing, you've taken it, Batman, Advanced Batman. You're the student who talks the most in the film. That room that the students are in reading the graphic novels, that's my university's graphic novel reading room. We've got this little arts university now. We've got a really nice graphic novel room, but these students, it was meaningful to them in different ways. Some of the students who were shy and reserved in other areas and didn't feel they could open up and just be themselves somewhere. Here's an environment, and when I was saying the thing about there's nothing too nerdy to talk about in a class called Batman, there's nothing too nerdy to be in a class called Batman. And that, empowering is not the best word, I think liberating is the better word.
We have had so much in the media, in pop culture recently, having to do with superheroes and comic books coming to life on the screen and on TV and that sort of thing. And Travis, when I interviewed you a week or two ago, we talked a little bit about this. I was wondering, what do you attribute to the explosion of superheroes that we have on the big screen, on the little screen, in our lives, on our bodies and tattoos and that sort of thing? We had talked about 9/11, so I thought maybe we could go down the line here on the panel and talk about how 9/11 actually changed a lot of things and sparked the superhero revolution, if I may. So we'll start with you, Miss Sweet.
Oh, great. Thank you. I think, first of all, we need heroes. Now, I think 9/11 was a cognitive shift. And when we look at trauma, it was a shared trauma that is repeated over and over and over again. And I think it's one of a great example where it was captured on TV. We all watched it live. I can tell you exactly what I was doing when I remember it, and I'm sure that you can too, or you can remember it. You see these images over and over again, and then you also see the images of everyday people doing very heroic things over and over again, and I think that awakens a need for that and a space for that, and so would be my answer.
And so for me, in criminal justice, a lot of my students want to go into law enforcement type roles or different helping professions, and so they often see themselves in certain superheroes. And so Batman is one that students often bring up since he's an everyday sort of person. They see themselves going into their career as being, an everyday sort of Batman. And I think 9/11 and the prominence of police, especially, really inspired a lot of my students.
Yeah, I like the point that both my panelists, for the most part, have made on this idea of everyday people, right? Yes, we're talking about fictitious heroes and they inspire us, but it's the second time I've watched this and I was inspired by the people in the film, right? So the one panel of Batman had a hero can be anybody written on the picture, and after September 11th, both DC and Marvel put out a special edition, a couple issues, graphic novels, commemorating some of the stories of the real heroes of the first responders, and they had, in many ways they used their own characters to sort of reflect upon everyday heroism, and so like the DC one has Superman and Crypto looking up at these first responders going into the towers and saying, wow, and so that was very striking for me.
What strikes me is the increased attention we're paying to the life of a soldier. You see more and more superheroes being conflicted by using violence, and in the Daredevil series on networks, there's a great conversation between the Punisher, who kills everyone he deems bad, and Daredevil, who tries not to. And there's a great line where our Punisher is taking Daredevil to task, and he says, look, you hide behind a mask, so you get to argue with yourself that I even really do that, but soldiers don't get to. And when we pay attention to what it's like to be someone who wields violence for the sake of others, we start to understand things that we didn't prior to 9/11. So I think it's an enhanced conversation.
And speaking of Daredevil, people are always going to say, why doesn't Batman kill the Joker? He can do so many horrible things if he kills the Joker. It's like, that's not his place. You know, the police can't maintain their wink-wink relationship with Batman and the vigilante if he does that. They don't do that with the Punisher. One of the best, really two conversations in the Daredevil series, one of the best discussions of why Batman doesn't kill is really a discussion between Daredevil and the Punisher. Later on, spoiler, later on when the Punisher is saying, Daredevil thinks, well, maybe I should this, maybe it's wrong of me not to do this, and the Punisher is like, no, that's not your place. And because if you do that, you've destroyed what you're doing. And the issue of 9/11, I don't think it's a coincidence the vast majority of superhero films, most of them have been made since 9/11. You know, the entire cumulative number before that is small relative to this. There are other things going on. CGI is part of it, absolutely. But it is the world we live in, and science fiction and fantasy sell better when the economy is bad, when wars are going on. And a lot of people look at that and think it's about escape. That can be in there, but that's not all there is to it. You look at this world, you want heroes, you want somebody to step up and solve these problems, and you can't imagine what it would take. So step away from that a little. It's like, forget some of the logic, let's move an additional step further away and remove some of those restraints. The total freedom, what would it take? And then you imagine these fantastic heroes that can do these things.
We just saw the marvelous documentary focusing on Batman, and I know, Travis, Batman is your guy, I'm guessing. But I'm wondering, psychologically, what does it mean when we have a favorite superhero? I'm presuming most people here have a favorite. What does it reveal about us? And does that mean something, are we reflecting when we like particular superheroes, something within us, or is that something we're projecting, something we wish that we could be? Now, Shelly, you're a big Hulk fan. Could you perhaps address that?
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit before, but I'll share this with everyone. So for me, the Incredible Hulk is much more than just a big green guy that smashes stuff. Okay, and so that's how
I said that's all he was. She corrected me.
He's not. And so when people say that, I actually feel a little offended for the Hulk, because that's not what he is at all. So the Hulk's alter ego is Dr. Bruce Banner. And so Dr. Bruce Banner, the anger that he has that leads to him being the Hulk is that he saw his mother killed by his father. So he watched, his mother be murdered, and then he also was abused by his father. So that anger and that rage that he feels comes from a really real place of domestic violence and, being abused as a child. And so, I tell my students this, so some of my students in the audience, you're going to be hearing this again, but so the first time I ever saw an issue of the Hulk was issue 312, which has this domestic violence incident in it, where his father, is beating his mother and hitting him, and so I come from a family where there was domestic violence, so this first issue that I saw of the Hulk, that's what was in it. It was domestic violence. It was issue 312, and so I initially picked it up because it looked really cool. There's this green guy on the cover. It's bright, and when I started flipping through it, suddenly I didn't feel so alone because you saw it in a comic book. And I think for us, we want to see ourselves, and this was a guy who was weak and couldn't fend off his father and save his mother or save himself, but then he becomes the Hulk, and he can save himself and save others. So when people talk about the Hulk just being a big, angry, stupid green guy, I take it personally offensive because he's not. And his anger, it comes from a place that I think a lot of people can identify with.
It's not easy being green.
That's right, it's not.
But why don't we talk a bit about anger in superheroes? I mean, a lot of us do have anger issues. And how positive is that as a role model, as a method of storytelling? You know, how positive is the anger issue in our modern superheroes as we have these more gray areas that we're delving into? This is, you know, the Batman we know today is not the Batman of this wonderful serials that came out in the 1940s, which you can watch on Turner Classic Movies. So let's talk a bit about anger and superheroes. And so, okay.
It depends on what the story is and what the character does with it. You know, it's like when you're mad, something's got you outraged, and people just tell you that you need to stop being angry. Oh, it's not that easy. But you've got these characters who, instead of just doing something horrible with their anger, they channel this into a different direction. Maybe not even just by punching somebody else, but into some other activity entirely. You know, some writers, they'll present Batman as being motivated mainly by, you know, every thug he slugs is a pitiful substitute for the one who killed his parents. And that is in there. But his first motivation is to keep other people from going through what he went through. There's a phenomenon called post-traumatic growth. A person could have some of the symptoms of PTSD, maybe they even went through a full set. But they have some, particularly the re-experiencing, they hang on to it more than other people. But they take their pain, and maybe their anger, and they don't let it go, they channel it into a useful direction. John Walsh's son Adam was brutally murdered. He becomes an advocate for missing children and goes to America's Most Wanted, waging his war on crime. Dennis Leitner, whose daughter was killed by a drunk driver, found some others against drunk drivers, as it was originally called. Elie Wiesel, who for 10 years would talk about the Holocaust, writes about what went through with his family. These are individuals who take their pain and their anger and they channel into something else. So there can be a place for saying you can have pain. Don't let people tell you don't have pain. And you hope to find good ways of managing it, but you can be a good, strong, useful, healthy person with pain in you.
In a way, I think all of you are superheroes because you're teachers and you're helping the next generations to learn and explore and to pass on what they've learned from you as well. And as academics, several of you frequently appear at the cons, various like Comic Con or Wizard Con, and you're on panels, and I'm just wondering, what does that mean to you? Not merely as academics, but as comic book fans, what does it mean for you to be at the cons? You're with the actors, there's writers there, there's directors there, there's the cosplayers. What does it mean for you guys to be there? Scott?
It just completely connects things in terms of my own life. I grew up without cons, so when you watch Stranger Things, if you've seen Stranger Things and you got 3 kids playing Dungeons and Dragons in their basement in the 80s, there was nowhere for them to go. That's what they did. And so for me to come full circle and to be able to do that is not just gratifying, but also to be able to teach people things about my discipline through that medium. And Eric and I sat on a panel on Captain America versus Iron Man, and people were asking us questions about morality through these characters, and we got to talk to them in ways about our discipline and what it says about morality. It was absolutely the best.
Eric, your feelings?
I can't say much more than that, than otherwise I just sit there and think, wow, this is a great gig. This is a job, really? I mean, should I be enjoying what I do this much? But no, yeah, I mean, I feel very fortunate that we are an institution, we have connections with Travis, where we have these opportunities to interact with people, not just as educators, but as fellow fans. I mean, part of fandom is connecting with other people. So, you know, we pick the heroes that we like, the Hulk, etc. We see something of ourselves in them, we bring that into us, but we share that with others, and we bring our relationships with other fans into we are social animals, we need others, and this is a great way to connect.
I notice you're wearing a Green Lantern. So if Travis is Batman, are you Green Lantern?
And brightest day and blackest night, we shall escape my sight.
Why? Why Green Lantern?
I've asked myself that a lot. I actually really like the Jeff Johns arc of Green Lantern. If we ever get a chance to do anything with Justice League, I totally want to write out
He's
Green
making a
Lantern.
pitch there, Travis.
So Green Lantern's willpower, that's where they draw their power from. They have the ability to overcome great fear, and that motivates everyone. do, and I just have always resonated with that drive. So that's the part I see of myself. You know, you mentioned also what I would aspire to be. There's actually the blue lanterns and the indigo lanterns. They're powered by hope and compassion. And if my real self is Green Lantern, I think an indigo or a blue lantern cultivating more hope and compassion is something I strive for. So that's my odd self, I guess.
Leandra, who are you?
Oh, geez, I wasn't prepared for that. Oh my God. I think growing up, it was actually hard to identify. I was raised by men, so most of the superheroes I saw were men, and I didn't jive with that. I think Barbara Gordon was probably the closest I came to connecting, and oddly, Poison Ivy. I don't dive into that. But I have to say, when I really, and I know it's not necessarily comic related, although there are great comics, Willow from Buffy. She was a nerd, she was smart, she was shy, and she was able to be human and struggle with things and go through trauma, and she kicked ass. And she did not have to outshine Buffy to do so, and I think that she's a really good, well-rounded hero.
Scott?
If you ask me in public, I'll tell you I'm Captain America, but I'm really Jessica Jones.
Hey!
He is, really.
Shelly, are you She-Hulk?
Well, I mean, the Hulk is my favorite, but there's a newer character, Squirrel Girl, who, if you haven't read, I'm always trying to peer pressure everyone to read it. It's amazing, and so I would hope that, you know, if I was going to be a hero, I would be Squirrel Girl, even though I love the Hulk.
I'm going to toss this out to anyone who wants to bat it around. This current comic book craze, the superhero craze, is this ever going to die down, or is this something we absolutely need and that it must continue for ourselves?
Well, for the next 3.5 years.
Oh?
The stories have gotten so much better. This 10 hours to tell a story over a season is a writer's dream. Writers will learn their skill in that space that wasn't there before, and I think the stories are just going to get better and better. And that's what we can sit up here and talk about them as they're discipline relevant, because they're complex enough that, you know, Travis can draw from it in a class and talk about a simulation of real life. So I just think it's going to get better.
And I think it's, I mean, the characters may be protean. They may take on different characteristics, but as they mentioned in the documentary, heroes have been around since stories have been recorded, right? And so, yeah, their powers may be different, their struggles will be different, they'll be time-specific and culture-specific, but heroes aren't going away.
And it used to not be cool to like this stuff. And so...
I got all the graphics.
Yeah,
we all
yeah, and so students... No, but students are shocked when I say, well, it used to not be cool.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
It's still weird to me when people look at what I do. They walk by my office with 120 Batmobiles and the big Christian Bale Batman in the background, and they say, that is so cool. And it's like, I'm pleased to hear that, but part of me goes, it's like, that's not the word that goes with what I'm doing.
I'm not supposed to be normative.
Yeah.
Hey.
But do you think maybe that has helped change lives? The fact that it now can be cool and kids don't have to be, you know, feel like they're ostracized and, you know, called terrible names because they saw Star Wars 15 times when it first came
Well,
out.
that's the story.
Okay. 3 years ago, some students came to me with an organization. They'd been meeting, but they wanted to make it an official campus organization. And they showed me the paperwork, and the name of the group was the Legion of Nerds. And I laughed, and I had to point out, I'm not laughing at this, I'm laughing in delight. It is the largest organization on campus. It's like there are nerds everywhere, but it's a matter of where the nerds of the feather get a chance to flock together. And they find each other. It's this open environment, and slight majority male, but they're the comic book.
So if you're a girl, that's a great place to go to get a date.
I said it's only a slight majority, but it's a lot of women too.
No, I just wanted to say, these stories that my kids grew up, like Avatar, The Last Airbender, Korra, Those stories weren't available when I was a kid. So those are more complex narratives, and that's going to normalize being more complex. So I do think these things completely matter. I think the better stories do matter, and I think the issues that were social issues for me as a kid just aren't social issues for them, because these issues have been kind of normalized for me.
Shall we open it up to questions? Okay, does anyone have a question for the panel? Anyone? Anyone? Yay, I get to live out my Phil Donahue fantasy. Well, one of them. Yes, sir.
I have a 58-year collection of Elevation with Batman and Detective and World's Finest, so I've been a geek for 54 years, so I'm very proud of that. But the question I have for you, for the panel, you mentioned Hulk 312, 312, I don't know what you said. Everybody, anyone out there want to share their favorite comic book, title or issue?
I just got a quick one I'll throw out there. I have very vivid memories of reading a particular, I think it's Submariner 54. And I have very vivid memories of reading it as a kid. Eric showed up, became a professor here a few years ago, kind of rekindled my interest. And I found that issue in Graham Crackers in Chicago about two years ago. And if you ever visit my house, my bar, it's framed right behind it. So, yeah.
I will throw out, I'm kind of late to the game, but I have really not been able to let go of The Killing Joke ever since I read it. There's something about it. If you can ask that, I can go on forever about it, but I still read it at least once a week before I go to bed.
Read Batman 251, Joker's Spider.
I will have to do that.
That's the one when he started killing again after not having killed people since earlier in the 40s. At first I was going to say, you don't have to have a favorite or anything, but there's this one Batman story from around that time, slightly later. Night of the Stalker. It has been in one of the Batman Greatest collections. Batman doesn't say a word for the entire story. It's just the street. He witnesses this bank robbery. His parents are murdered on the street. He's spending the story tracking these people down, and he ends up showing mercy. And back at his place at dawn, he's taken back his mask, and he's the young boy himself again, inside, weeping. And it's just it's a really strong story. And happened from somewhere in the early 70s. I discovered it later.
Not 100 pages.
The comic matter. The story is not a 100-pager.
The comic was 100 pages. I got that when I was in fourth grade.
I'm going to be thinking about that question for like the next 3 weeks. I would have to say though, what I keep coming back to is, and I think maybe it's cliche, but Superman was my guy for a long period of time. And so Superman 75, The Death of Superman, the Dan Jurgens era, that one stuck with me. I got it for Christmas. I opened it in a black polybagged edition. I very carefully cut the top out, pulled it out, turned the pages very gently, and it just still sticks with me.
Yeah, and I would say Hulk 312 was the most influential, but my favorite is Planet Hulk. So it's literature.
I'd like to follow up with something that Dr. Clevenger mentioned when she was talking about Hulk and seeing something reminding herself of herself. And the trend now in comics to be a little more inclusive, like Miss Marvel and some of the changes. Could you talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of trends in that way?
I mean, so I mentioned Squirrel Girl, and so if you
Being unbeatable.
unbeatable, yeah, and so she fights people who, you know, we would think are, you know, that you wouldn't be able to beat, but she beats them, oftentimes with kindness. And she also, one of the things I like is she is very feminist in the sense that she will be cognizant of gender pronouns. And so that is really interesting to me. And she's a computer science major, which is traditionally male dominated. And so seeing a college student, you know, I think, especially for my students and younger readers, they could see themselves there in the Ms. Marvel. And I, of course, love Batwoman, who's a lesbian, and I think that that's really important for us to be able to see ourselves of all sexual orientations in comics. So I think there's been a really positive trend in seeing different types of characters.
And I think that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons that it's always been a safe place to sell. I mean, look at X-Men. The whole thing is built on the idea that we can be outsiders and still do good and have this whole, like, how do we fit in? And Mystique is just, I mean, she's a great bisexual character with a whole series of other things. And so I think that it just continues to be ahead of the curve, and as we continue as a society to get up with that curve, it'll continue to push the boundaries because it's always been that way. Not always. I don't want to say that because I don't like that word, but in my experience, it's always been a safe place.
I think we lost something when Barbara Gordon started walking.
Yeah.
From when she was paralyzed in Killing Joke, she, soon after, some other writers were appalled by that story, they turned her into this character Oracle, the super computer genius who helped all these different superheroes, to the point that sometimes they had to figure out, okay, she's become too easy way to help these superheroes. But she showed us that she could be paralyzed, but she could still defend herself even physically. She was a strong, wonderful character. A friend of mine, Jill, well, you saw Jill, she's in the film, Muscular Dystrophy. She cried, and she had a hard time when she found out Barbara Gordon was not going to continue to be Oracle. She was going to, with the New 52, she was walking and fixed again. Gail Simone found a way to turn that into a better story, but I think something very serious was lost when they lost Oracle.
Can I just add something? I just recently, about a month ago, finished watching the Legend of Korra. And what I loved about that was at the end, two women walk off together, and they're holding hands, and it's just what they're doing. There's no... They're just
oh my
friends.
God, look, they're lesbian.
No, well, that's left up to you, and therefore the art becomes diagnostic of who you are, as opposed to being clear what they are. And I really appreciate that.
Can I ask you a question? Yeah, of course. There's oftentimes when the storyline goes in a certain way, or maybe a TV adaptation of Batman like Gotham is put on, and you had this look on your face when I mentioned Gotham. When fans see changes or they see an adaptation that they don't like, it tends to spark a lot of infighting. How healthy is that?
I like that. I would say as long as it says somewhat civil and people don't start throwing punches, then
Or trolling each other. There are ways of figuratively throwing punches.
Yeah.
Or not being civil, or not respectful of somebody else's opinion. It can be like, why do you like Batman versus Superman? But that doesn't mean, I think, if somebody's a moron for like, my friend Victor Dandridge, he has his own small comic book company, and he loves Batman versus Superman. So we've done panels arguing about it in front of an audience. It's not even arguing, we're discussing it in front of an audience. I try to make it sound a little more like an argument for the audience. It's fun, but we're just talking. We have completely different views on this movie, but we're just talking. Have you ever had a discussion with somebody you don't know it's an argument, later on you find out it was from their point of view? It's like, people can have very strong opinions. A lot of it, why you have these strong feelings, is that it's what's true about the character to you, what's meaningful and important about that character to you. And when this other version bothers them, it says it made that character has different value to them. When people argue about whether Superman should kill Zodin, and feelings people have about that, sometimes like, well, the situation is that he had to. It's like, that's the thing with the superheroes, they figure out a way anyway. So I've got my feelings on that one. My thing on Gotham cost me a consulting job.
How so?
Well, there was another Batman-related TV show that was in development, and if it had been the one they'd gone with, I would have had a consulting job. So I got a chip on my shoulder about Gotham. That. So
I still think you should watch the director's cut of Batman v Superman.
that requires me to watch Batman v Superman.
And I respect your feelings.
The passion is wonderful. The passion is wonderful with superheroes and comic books, and it's beautiful.
People need passion in their lives. People who live without passion, there's something empty and missing. You get one life. Live it. And passion for something is important to that. One of the things I love most about going to these conventions I discovered in 2007 when I go to San Diego Comic-Con for the first time. Summer I was teaching psychology and literature course and found its value. I go to this environment that was celebrating interest, that might ostracize people elsewhere in their lives. And you might not have the same interest. You might disagree, or you might not know a darn thing about Cora, and this person might be, what they're fanatic about might be, antique buttons. And even though it's like you don't know the details of that, you understand the passion, and you connect as people through that very human quality.
Yeah, and I collect some data on the psychological functions of fandom, and what's awesome about fandom is that this passion, you know, like I may not, like, so I'm a home brewer, right? I love learning about brew making process, I love comics, etc., all these other nerdy things.
We like to brew too.
Well, I'm glad you did, yes.
Why didn't you bring any?
Well, it's because I have to brew another batch. Because it doesn't last very long. I understand there's these things called sports. I don't get them, you know, but I also find something very life-affirming that if someone can find passion about anything, you know, that's, you know, what you dig.
It can be a great unifier. We're not necessarily passionate about the same things, but we are passionate, and to respect each other's passion is heroic. Anybody else with questions? Yes, I'm coming.
We need a soundtrack.
Do the Jeopardy thing.
So one thing I really liked about the movie was the inspiring things that people did, like the cop who drove around and was really concerned about the kids. And there was a lot of examples of things like that happening. So how can you foster initiative to do things like that in people using these things? Or have you guys done anything like that? I mean, something like this even, showing people the movie and talking about it is good, but do you have ideas?
Travis, are you Petaluma Batman?
That guy will never confirm on that. Actually, Brett, the filmmaker, he didn't learn Petaluma Batman's real name. He said the guy needed to sign his real name for the release. Brett only glanced to make sure that there was a name, but he didn't read what the name was. So Brett didn't learn Petaluma Batman's name. And people did, apparently I've inspired some people. I've had people come up and thank me for doing the stuff I do, for some of these books, especially the Batman book. Thanking me for different reasons. Some of it because of what it gave them a different perspective on, but some because it opened up some other things in their own lives. Like this college student or this high school student, actually. I was doing an interview at New York Comic Con, and I was being interviewed by a reporter dressed as Poison Ivy, and this girl with a Sailor Moon outfit but Deadpool mask is standing there waiting till the interview's over, and she comes up and she's been carrying a copy of my book around. It's gotten battered in the course of the convention. The comic book writer Grant Morrison signed the autograph page, so we both signed it. She's been carrying it around, hoping to cross paths with me, not just to get me signed, but to thank me, because she had used that to show some other people in her life that there's something meaningful and useful going on with these things. And that meant a lot to me while I'm thinking, who's in the Deadpool mask that's telling me all this?
I haven't done any direct empirical work on it, but there are people who are studying what's called broadly the moral emotions, right? And a lot of positive psychologists are doing that now. And there's this work being done on what they're calling elevation, right? Also inspiration. But I don't know about you all, but when I was watching this film, you know, I felt a little swell in my chest, a little bit up. I mean, we say being uplifted, it's an embodied emotion. And the people who do this research say that we feel this when we see someone behaving in a morally heroic or just a kind, going out of their way to be generous way, right? And whether the studies, they've done a lot of experiments on this, whether they're showing real, you know, accounts or fictitious accounts, whether it's video or reading it, this actually makes people behave more pro-socially in the lab. So it does seem to, at least in that setting, make them behave as better people. So
I wanted to complete something on one of the stories. That was shot in 2012, and it was still a while before we saw the complete film. Kyle, the 7-year-old then, who had the leukemia, the following year he completed his last treatment, and he's been, you know, leukemia-free ever since. He's just fine. Often when I start saying a follow-up on Kai, I see some people clench up. Yes, don't tell us he's he died. I said, no, Kai is great. Kai is fine. Joe Santosi, you got engaged. Lenny's not with us. Lenny Robinson, the one in Batman outfit when he visits the kids in the hospitals. Should have started this one. It was more of a fun one. Lenny had stopped by the side of the road to help someone, who was having auto trouble, and so someone else drove over too far and hit him. But even in that, it's like he died getting out to help somebody. And isn't it endorsement for helping people? It was very hard for those of us who knew Lenny, or even people who just knew of him through things like this. That there were plenty of other people following up and doing those things. There was an engagement he had to speak to children in a hospital, and since he was gone, somebody else stepped in to be Batman for them.
Because we all are Batman.
And I do want to follow up with that because it's important with children. I don't want to get too nerdy, but in Star Trek, there's a great episode where they talk about there's a species that only talks in metaphors. They only talk, and so if I say Juliet on a balcony, you know that I'm describing a romantic scene. And so for you to say, I'm in Batman, that says something for a child, particularly children who've been through trauma or witnessed it, or children who are trying to negotiate. They don't have the depth to understand it, but they get it. And so to have that inspiring story, so that's why trauma therapy works so well, because they can see the story, and now they have a metaphor and a schema that doesn't require a lot of thought. And so they can walk around like your story with the West Point story and say, I am Batman. And so for us, we try to have that narrative in their mind to be inspiring, be an upstander. Saying, like, he's very quick, and stories are really great at that because they're inventive and they're creative and it makes sense. I just wanted to add that.
And you don't have to have an expensive suit or a great car or anything like that. You could go to the Humane Society website and you could sponsor an animal, and you could sponsor it in the name of Batman. And who knows, you could even start a trend that way or something your kid might be interested in.
Could I just add in response to that question? You probably had the TLC on Travis coming here, probably about a month ago, maybe a month and a half. And I started working with university marketing and communication probably about 3 weeks ago. And they were super stoked on getting us a logo. And they sent drafts. Eric, Leandra and I talked about them. And this design came to my computer 2 days ago. And blah, 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 make the thing work. We have this logo. So the point is, we wanted to create some kind of umbrella. I don't want to call it a bat signal, but that was the idea. Some kind of umbrella logo so that we could generate interest like this, and then potentially have students come to us and come up with ideas of how we want to engage in what I might call micro-heroisms, right? And what kind of things we can do that actually have practical impact. And having people, together under some kind of name, a team brand or something, is part of what we're trying to start here. So.
Any more questions? Yes.
Sorry to be in the front. Hi, I'm actually one of Dr. Clevenger's grad students, but I have a question for Dr. Langley. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think you'll ever do a book on Harry Potter?
This is the second time I've answered this one today. I can't. There has been a Psychology of Harry Potter book about 2007, 2008 from Ben Bell Publishing. The Psychology of Harry Potter, an unauthorized examination of The Boy Who Lived. It's a good book.
We read it in part of it in class.
And the last book hadn't come out, a lot of the movies hadn't come out. Best book proposal I ever wrote was for our own Harry Potter book. And I've been told in no uncertain terms that we will never get to do a Harry Potter book for some publishing business legal reasons. So, yes, I consider doing a Harry Potter book. No,
Not legally, anyway.
Well, sometimes when I've teased my publisher or my editor a little, because there's another publisher that really wants me. I said, it's like, oh, maybe I'll just go over to Turner. Hey, Turner, want my Harry Potter book? But no, except for one thing, I'm real happy where we are.
And Sterling.
Yes, I'm very
And all
happy.
his books
Actually,
and Sterling.
and the one thing I'm not happy with is not actually Sterling. It's something else we all have to do with. Folks, Sterling is great.
Any more questions? Questions? Any questions? Yes, sir. That was not me.
So, just, could you guys say, like, who was your favorite, or who portrayed Batman? I'm sorry, I don't know where to start with. Who did your favorite portrayal of Batman? A small reason why.
30 seconds each. I just love Nolan's Batman. I love the whole series. I'm not a Batman aficionado, but I love the Heath Ledger just dropped my head.
I'm probably going to steal what you talked about earlier today, but Kevin Conroy in the animated series.
See, I've already answered this one.
Yeah, but
So he's just stealing my answer.
well, but to be fair, I mean, I was. What year did
It's
that come out?
interesting, could you
92?
explain that, because it's animated, so
Right,
he's just
so-
acting with his voice. I'm
Yeah.
very interested in that.
Which is very fun.
He's playing Batman more than anyone else.
Well, and I was probably 12 when that show came out, right? And so very formative time, and I'm like, kid watching it on TV, right? So I think just in my mind, his voice, he is Batman. So I got to meet him at WizardCon, and that was kind of cool, especially as a guy. I was like, oh, I am Batman.
I also like the animated series because I was 10. But I remember going to see the Michael Keaton Batman at the movies. So that was my first sort of movie Batman.
I love Michael Keaton because he's not like super hot, but he's hot. And he's like rounded, and he's like, I mean, I don't know, I can't explain it. And the way he portrays it, he's so just kind of like an everyman's man, kind of, doesn't take himself too seriously. But, Val Kilmer looks good from the mouth down, so I'm good with him.
And if I can plug for the Normal Theater, the 89 Keaton Batman will be showing in the next couple days. So.
I will be here.
It's Batman on the same marquee out there with this film.
What's your favorite Batman portrayal?
Oh, definitely Conroy.
Yeah, there you go.
What do you think of Batfleck, though? I'm curious.
Is he in a different movie? I might have an opinion. I don't know what he's doing what he's doing with the film, with the material he's been given. With what for the job that he's been given to do, he did fine. Affleck has more range than a lot of people realize. And I remember, it was like, Mr. Mom can't be Batman. Or later on, it's like, the Brokeback Mountain guy's the Joker, what are you talking about? So it's like, yeah, Hathaway, really? So when they cast Affleck, in fact, AP News article, they included my tweet about, I was like, you know what, I've gone through this with Keaton and Ledger and Hathaway. It's like, I'm open-minded on Affleck. And again, it's with each of them, you have to judge them for the material. Part of our favoritism with Conroy is that that's the best depiction of Batman. It plays to his strengths, gets to do all these different stories. Those half-hour stories get to play to his strengths instead of, why hasn't he beaten that villain yet? And it's like, it's hard to imagine George Clooney who's playing it all the same way, doing a better job. But maybe he could have done a better job than when he was in Batman & Robin. I'm not expecting that, but Adam West was the right Batman for what he was doing. I don't think anybody could have done a better job at delivering that job, that word. When I was a kid, I didn't know it was a joke. He was my childhood Batman, and it's been fun to have known him as a person for 8 years.
What's he like? What was he like?
He's smart, he's witty, he can't go 2 minutes without making a joke. Yeah. But he also has a very serious side. He loved fans, very passionate. Sometimes I run into somebody and say, well, I met Adam West and he was a bit of an ass, and I would always be, did you talk to him late in the day? Yeah. Late in the day, when he's tired, his sarcastic sense of humor would come across as sounding crankier. But Adam loved the fans. He was a very good guy. And when you meet somebody when he's 80, you know he's only going to be around so long. So it's nice to have known him for 8 years. For a while, it would be I'd see him at conventions. This is going to be when he doesn't remember me. And it's Professor Travis, how are you doing, Doc? And I'm greeting him. I'm doing well, while my inner child is Batman. And so yeah, it was inevitable. I had a text that I had been expecting because I knew he was sick. He had a quick bout with leukemia there at the end. I had a text from a friend. I just saw the news about Adam West. I'm so sorry. It's like, okay, so she figured I already knew. My son didn't text me. He wanted to let me live a few more hours in a role that had Adam West in it because he knew I would check my messages in the morning. And and the other day, Langley died, a comic book writer I got to know very well. So when you get to know them when they're old, you're going to be losing them a lot, but you know what? It's still worth it. You know, Erwin Hazen, the last living artist from early golden age of comics. I got to know him the last few years of his life. One of my regular things when I would go to New York would be to go to visit with Erwin. And I always tell people, seek out the oldest creators at the convention. Talk to them, let them know you appreciate them. Don't be worried that they're just going to be trying to sell you something. Like, maybe so, as I still were talking to them. Let them know you appreciate them, and I hate to put it as crass as last chance to see, but think of it that way. It could be your only chance to see them. And it's worth it, and I get to know Jerry Robinson, creator of the Joker. I really think the reason Adam West joined me on a panel once was because he wanted to meet Jerry for the first time. And of course, Michael Uslan, producer of the Dark Batman movies, had been a little bad blood between he and Adam, and I wasn't friends with them yet, so I deliberately set them next to each other. It was either going to go spectacularly badly or very nicely. They were very nicely.
We have time for one more question. Any more questions? Are we sure?
Okay, with the Wonder Woman movie that's come out, do you think,
Let me,
I can just yell.
With the Wonder Woman, with the success as it is, with the Wonder Woman coming out, do you think we will be able to see more female characters, superheroes?
Yeah, I was gonna actually, earlier we talked about Comic-Con and all of that. I saw so much more positivity and open-mindedness to having women who can be bad, which to me is always a sign that you've come full circle when you can allow your characters to be evil, because now you're willing to actually make them human. So that was probably what I was gonna say for your other question, was that was the greatest thing in this last one, was just seeing that level of interest and that level of asking those really deep questions and actually looking to women in the comic book world and saying, please tell your story. So I'm really excited about that, and I think that I was so dreading it because I was so worried it was going to go badly. But the fact that it is by far, it's a huge accomplishment. I think we will see that, and I'm hoping that means that we'll see a less sexualized Black Widow movie come out.
That would be so cool.
It would be so great. I mean, there's lots of really great stories to be told, and I think, and I will say that while Wonder Woman definitely kicked it off, I think the portrayal of Mystique through some of the X-Men movies really did kind of, Jane Grey, and some of that has been really helpful in setting the bar and setting, a really good foundation for the explosion that we've had. So
I hope that's not the only lesson the studio executives learned from the film. They do need the lesson that Supergirl, Catwoman, and Elektra were not indicative of whether people want to watch a female Supergirl movie. And that is a very important message for them to get. I hope they also see the important lesson that a superhero can be truly heroic. A superhero can be optimistic and have faith in humanity, and be a hero. We want our heroes to be heroic. And I hope they learn that lesson too. They don't have to be. They don't have to all be born of trauma, or even where they go back and retroactively insert trauma into the histories of heroes who didn't have it. I mentioned we were at a panel one time talking about heroes and trauma, and he said, and we were talking about the ones where some writers were going back and inserting trauma in the history of characters who didn't have it. Like Barry Allen's mother, for most of his history, had not been murdered. He was one of the few superheroes to have both living parents around. So writer messes with that. And once some people are just going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And people need to see that.
Thank you guys so much for joining us this evening at the Normal Theater. So thanks to Shelly and Scott, Leandra, Eric, and Travis Langley as well.
Applause for Laura Kennedy, please.
Please join Travis at this table and come up and say hi, get an autograph, buy a book, and just tell them how much you